Hello, and welcome to the Crossing Church meeting online. Glad you can be with us. Glad that I have this opportunity to put these videos online for you. Hopefully it's helping you. I've been getting good feedback on that, so I'll continue to do it. It is Valentine's Day, or it will be Valentine's Day by the time any of you are watching this, most likely. So, as it turns out, I will be talking about love today in a bit of a different way. And that's just the way it worked out, where I am in this series in First Peter. I didn't plan it. It was just kind of neat when I did out the schedule. I said, oh, that's going to be right on Valentine's Day, and it's worked out. So, but that's where we're going to be getting to is love. But before I get to that, I'm actually going to talk a little bit about football. You're like, football, Dave, you've been talking about football like every week. Well, I've been watching a lot of football. That's why. And I gave about 5 hours of my life this last Sunday to watching the Super Bowl. So I at least want to get a sermon analogy out of it. So we did watch the Super Bowl this last week, and Tom Brady won once again. It was, I think, his seventh Super Bowl victory, 6 of them with the Patriots, now 1 with the Buccaneers. Now I want to talk about him for a little bit, because Tom Brady is, you don't have to be a fan of his, actually. A lot of people aren't fans of him because he just keeps winning, get kind of tired of the same name year after year, but you don't have to be a fan of his to admire his commitment to the game. He's nearly my age. He's 43. I looked that up on Alexa. He's 43 years old, but he can still win a Super Bowl. Okay, I have to take a breather after typing the word Super Bowl. Like I got to take a rest. This guy can still win Super Bowls, still play football games, and he's doing really well at it. And the reason he can do that year after year is because he's committed to his health. Right? That's just he's immortal, and but he's got a commitment to health that most of us don't have. He wants to keep playing football, and he wants to win, and to be healthy. He's got to be healthy in order to do all that, so he's committed to it. And so he has this regimen that he sticks to daily. He's really, really regimented, and a lot of athletes have to be. So it's not, Tom Brady's not the only one we could talk about, obviously, but he's the one right now who's on top of the athletic world. And he's 43, which is unlike most athletes. Still doing this at 43. So I looked up his regimen. Anyway, I'm not going to go through the whole thing with you, but at 5:30 he wakes up, he drinks a smoothie, electrolyte water. He has breakfast with his family every day. He also has dinner with his family every day. That's like a set thing. He's got family time as part of that. Really good. At 8 o'clock he hits the gym, works out for a few hours. 10 o'clock he hits the beach, which must be nice. 11 o'clock he's reviewing. I said I wouldn't go through all these things. Anyway, he works out again later on in the afternoon, has dinner with his family. By 8:30, it's lights out. So he's up at 5:30, lights out at 8:30. How many of you are lights out by 8:30? Okay, never mind the getting up at 5:30. So just his time commitments alone, he's really committed, but he keeps these commitments. He's committed to his health. He also maintains a strict diet. So when he eats like healthy stuff I don't want to eat. So that's why if we were to stand next to each other, you'd know which one was in his mid-40s and which one was winning Super Bowls. But he's committed to a strict diet. He's committed to working out. He's committed to stretching. After his afternoon workout, he stretches for an hour. He spends an hour of his day just stretching his 43-year-old body. I call that nap time. That's a stretch too, but he's committed to his family. And so anyway, all these commitments that he makes, or make it so that he's able to do what it is he's doing. Now enough about Tom Brady. Like I said, I don't want to talk about football for too long here, but what I do want to talk about is commitment, which is where we're going with this today. Like I said, today's Valentine's Day, and it's the day that we focus on love, usually romantic love, flowers and chocolates love, but a preferable love, the love that is preferable to that is bigger than that, because that can fade. We all know that flowers and chocolate are lovely on Valentine's Day, and we get that, but we know that doesn't mean that relationship will last, right? What we want to talk about is committed love. And a commitment comes about when a couple, let's say, are ready to make vows to each other. And we call this marriage, and they make marriage vows, and they're not just vows of how they will feel in 20, 30, 40, 50 years. But these are vows of what they will do, right? They will love and cherish each other until death do us part. That's a vow of something I will do, not just how I'll feel, because feelings come and go and they change. We know all that from experience. But what will I do, and will I stay committed to this person? and then they give there's the exchange of rings, and with that they say, I give you this ring as a symbol of my vow, all that I am and all that I have, that I will stay committed. They say the vows, I promise like this ring to stay committed, and they put the ring on. That's what that is all about, that vow to stay committed. And that's what love is. It's more than romantic, more than feelings, more than something that's fleeting. Many of us have experienced a fleeting love, but this is that level that's committed to the end, and that's what we're going to be looking at today. We're in 1 Peter. If you got your Bible, in 1 Peter, and like I said, the passage is about love today. I didn't plan it to be that way. It just worked out schedule-wise, and that was kind of exciting. But it's not romantic love. I'm not going to be reading to you from Romeo and Juliet. I'm going to be reading from 1 Peter chapter 1. And what he's going to be talking about today is a committed love, a love that would have to endure to the end in order to see these people through the trials that they were going through. So if you read along with me here, 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 22 is where I'll be starting here. Pause me if you need to go grab a Bible or look it up on your phone. 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 22 says, "Since you have purified your souls in obeying the truth through the Spirit, in sincere love of the brethren, love one another fervently with a pure heart, having been born again, not of corruptible seed, but incorruptible, through the word of God which lives and abides forever. Because," and now he's going to quote the Old Testament, he says, "all flesh is as grass, and all the glory of man as the flower of the grass. The grass withers, and its flower falls away. But the word of the Lord endures forever. Now this is the word which by the gospel was preached to you." So the main point of the passage, the takeaway, is to love one another. Okay, that's where this is really going. But I want us to remember the context, why he's saying this when he's saying it. Because it wasn't just like God said, well, I need to tell them to love one another. Peter, tell them to love one another. Peter goes, I love one another. Somewhere in the letter, whenever, it doesn't matter. There's a context. Peter's writing to people who were displaced, who were feeling strangers, that he writes them as pilgrims, strangers in a strange land, I call the series, right? Being persecuted for their faith. And this was Emperor Nero's persecution, which is probably the most famous Christian persecution of all time, the most brutal. This is when Nero was a sick guy. And I don't want to go into too much about Nero, but he would take Christians and light them in his garden as torches so he could walk around in his garden at night, right? That kind of stuff. So this wasn't, that he was being deleted. People were being deleted from Twitter. They were being deleted from, Earth. And that's the kind of thing, that's the level of persecution these people were experiencing. It was huge. And so, because of that, many of them were leaving the faith. Many of them were saying, I'm not going to be torched by Nero, or, this isn't worth it. I liked the idea, but I'm out of here. And so that's why the writer of Hebrews wrote that whole letter. You look up or read the book of Hebrews. That's the context for Hebrews. People are leaving the faith, so he's writing to say, don't leave the faith. There's nothing better than Jesus. Nothing tops him. Not Moses, not angels, not priesthood, not any blood of bulls and goats. It's all, Jesus is the tops of everything, so stick with him. And so in that letter, and especially in chapter 10, which I encourage you to read if you haven't read through Hebrews chapter 10 for a while, but you may recognize some of these commands if you're familiar with that passage. But he tells them in that one passage in chapter 10, he tells them to draw near in faith. He tells them to hold fast to your confession, right? I have confessed Christ, so hold fast to that. Don't drop that. Don't leave that confession. He tells them to consider one another in continuing to meet together, because some people had stopped meeting together. That's the context for that. It's not a passage you want to use against people because they won't come to the Bible study. Oh, you're not meeting together. That's really unfair. The passages, some people have chosen not to meet together at all because they're walking away from the faith. That's the idea there. Not that they're not going to enough Bible studies, or only one Bible study a week, where some people are going to two. Be careful with that one. So they're to consider one another by meeting together. It was needed. It was so necessary for people to meet together. And I know this last year, many people have been feeling this, right? When suddenly it's like, now you can't meet together. You go, you don't know what you've got till it's gone, right? And now it's like, we need each other. So that was what he was telling them. He said, do not cast away your confidence, do not draw back, keep believing. And the whole idea, if you were to sum up all those commands, is stay committed. Stay committed to the faith, stay committed to one another. And 1 Peter is giving that a very similar message to to the same people, essentially, the same people group, same time period. he says, because of what you're suffering right now, you need each other more than ever right now. Okay, so don't give up meeting, don't give up being together, don't give up encouraging each other, don't walk away from the faith. Instead, love each other fervently. And that's what we'll be looking at here. You need each other more than ever. So that's the context of why he's telling them to love one another, because some of them are considering leaving the faith. And all the more, in order to endure through this trial, they need to love one another. If they don't get that right, they're in big trouble. Same for us. Let me look at verse 22 again. He says, since you have purified your souls in obeying the truth through the Spirit in sincere love of the brethren, since you've already done this, you've already loved your brethren, love one another fervently with a pure heart. So Peter's basically telling them now, it's time, you've loved your brothers, you've done that. So he's encouraging. He said, you guys have done this. But now he's saying love one another fervently, and it may sound like he's just repeating the same thing. In English, it is, essentially. He says, since you've loved one another, now love one another. It's like, well, why is he saying that? Doesn't make a lot of sense. But in the Greek, of course, it does make sense. There's two different words being used for love there. The first one is, it's actually the whole phrase, love of the brethren, which is Philadelphia. It comes from the word phileo, which is a different word for love than agape, which is the second word he uses. So he says, since you have already had love of the brethren, the whole word Philadelphia, where, of course, we get our city, since you've already done this, you've already loved your brethren, now I want you guys to bump it up. I want you to agape each other, okay? And it's a deeper love. It's the similar in those two words are used also when Peter is reinstated at the end of John, and Peter won't say, I agape you, Jesus. Jesus says, do you agape me? He says, I phileo you. I phileo you. Do you agape me? I phileo you. And then Jesus finally goes, do you phileo me? And he's like, I phileo you. So Jesus kind of drops it a level for Peter in that. But there's that two different words, and there's a meaning there. The agape is a stronger love, and that's why he attaches to it this word fervently. Agape love one another fervently without ceasing. A love that does not come to an end. A love that is committed. It doesn't, not just a convenient love. That convenient loves we all have. Convenient loves, it works for now. It's here today, gone tomorrow. I don't just mean romantically, but the love of this or the love of that, or I love football, or I love this, and then there's a season, it's gone, and we move on. This is a love that endures and does not cease. It's committed. It's best described, this kind of love is best described most famously in 1 Corinthians 13. Right? It's the go-to passage for wedding ceremonies, where it speaks about what love is. So you guys will recognize this as I read it to you, 1 Corinthians 13. But it's describing agape love, and that's the word that's used here in this passage. Love, so the kind of love he's telling them to have, and that's why I'm sharing this other passage with you. Love is patient. So agape love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. Some of you could finish this for me. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. There's a tough one. Love, agape love, does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. And so agape love, in its very definition, is without ceasing. It never fails. It keeps going. And so we use this in a wedding ceremony because that's the kind of commitment we want these people to have together. And very similarly, as Christians, we're called to have that same level of love. Obviously not a romantic love, and nothing about that passage is romantic. Being patient and kind and not boasting and all those things. That's not anything about kissy, huggy, lovey stuff. That's all about, I will remain committed to you. Okay? Even once you start falling apart. Like, will you still need me? Will you still feed me when I'm 64? Right? That's the level we want, is someone to say, yes, I will. And 74 and 84 and so on. So Peter, and as Paul has done also in other places, is telling these people, love one another like you're getting married. That level of commitment with vows that you tend to hold to. Love without ceasing. So this is really, like I said, this is the big point of this passage, and maybe even all that Peter commands them, because he says it again later on in chapter 4, verse 8. He tells them, above all things, Have fervent, same word, ongoing, without ceasing love for one another. For love will cover over a multitude of sins. And we've all probably heard that verse used. Not always in context, but context in this letter is this is the second time he's telling them, and he's telling them to do it above all else. So we're going to go through a whole bunch of different commands as we go through this series here. How to obey this and submit to that and do these different things. And he says, above all this stuff I've just laid out, love one another without ceasing. It's the Christian command. It's what Jesus told his disciples a couple times. He said, this is my command. So what is Jesus' command? Well, you could go into all kinds of things. But if he was to sum it up, and the top one above all, this is my command, that you love one another as I have loved you. If you read, and I encourage you to do this if you have time this week, the letter of 1 John, towards the end of the Bible, very short letter, just a couple pages in most Bibles. You can read it in 10 minutes. And very kind of black and white letter. But that is something that he brings out there in that letter also, to the command to love one another and not hate your brothers. In fact, he says this is how you can tell the children of God from the children of the devil, is we love our brothers. Okay? That love, that agape love, is what shows, what proves the difference. Because people can say anything, but it's what we do consistently, right? And that's what this is about, a consistent, committed love for one another. Above all things, have fervent love for one another. He says it a couple times in his book, or he didn't call it a book, he called it a letter. We call it a book. Verse 23 now. It says, having been born again, not of corruptible seed, but incorruptible, through the word of God which lives and abides forever, because all flesh is as grass, and all the glory of man is the flower of the grass. The grass withers, and its flower falls away, but the word of the Lord endures forever. Now this is the word of which by the gospel is preached to you. So the rest of this little passage we're looking at today, the rest of chapter 1, is really about endurance. Okay? Because he's told them, I want you guys to love one another in an enduring way. And so let me now give an example of what I mean by endurance. So that's what we get for 23, 24, 25. Firstly, he says that the glory of humanity does not endure. I think that's easy enough to attest to. Okay. Secondly, the gospel, though, does endure. So he gives an example of something that does not endure, an example of something that does endure. And so our love is meant to endure like the gospel, he says. But the quote is from Isaiah 40, which is a great chapter. He doesn't get an exact quote in there. He words it just a little bit differently, but you get the point, and we can recognize it Isaiah 40. It says, people are like flowers and grass, lovely one day, withered the next. And of course, starting off talking about Tom Brady, who's roughly my age, but winning Super Bowls. And my son Paul was saying, look, he looks so old. I said, Paul, he does not look old. He does not look 43. I look, well, more than 43. I'm 46, but I look about 56. In fact, I had a guy, I'm getting off track here, but I had another employee at Home Depot who's clearly older, I think, clearly older than me. He was talking to me about retirement and how he's, working again after retirement and such and such. And so he said, so then he asked me, what brought you out of retirement? That felt good. Felt really good. But anyway, I was thinking about this. We wither, our glory. It doesn't last. I know somewhere I have a picture of me when I was about 17. We were going to Maui at Christmas. And there's a picture of me, and I've got my shirt off, and I'm tan and glorious, right? 6-pack, right? I was working out in school, weight training. My hair was glorious. It was long. It was glorious hair. So there's this picture of me anyway when I'm 17, looking all glorious. Shirt off, long hair, and now I'm like, you couldn't pay me, $1 billion to take my shirt off in public now. And the 6-pack that I had in that picture now is just a full keg, right? It's just one big bowl. The glory's gone. A guy like Tom Brady's worked very hard to maintain that glory. I have not, but that's what he does. Anyway, but eventually Tom Brady will fall apart. Eventually he will wither. He can't maintain this forever because it's apart from nature. We naturally decompose. We are all slowly withering. Okay, that's the process, and so that's why Peter brings this up, and not just our bodies, obviously, but all that comes with humanity, our achievements, the honor that comes to us. Our wealth, our strength. We watch all these things deteriorate and wither and go to others. The next generation come up and break all our records. And, we won this achievement award back in 93, but someone came in 94 and won it as well. And even bettered it, right? So that's what happens. Great cities decline, kingdoms fall, companies that were once great fold. It's the truth that all around us changes and nothing lasts. Nothing can really endure. It all has to morph and change and fall apart even. But the point Peter's making here is, in that world that we live in, where we know everything decays and withers and falls apart, my hair withered too. Enough about that. But all these things, he compares us to grass that, it withers, and the flower, it fades. But then he says, put it differently than that. We know that, but he said the gospel, the message of the gospel endures forever. That's what he means by the word, right? They didn't have Bibles then, so they weren't referring to the Bible as the word, referring to the message of the gospel as the word. It endures forever. Because truth is, even if all the Bibles on the planet were burned up and you could never get a hold of another one again, the message that was in there will endure forever. Okay? That the point, the gospel, which is the point of it, will last forever. Even if all the Bible's burned up, you can never get another one. And this is why he's telling these people this, because again, what they were suffering, everything in their world was changing. Strangers in a strange land, right? Well, what do I do now? Where am I? What's going on? They're persecuting us. This isn't good. Okay, but he says, but what God has for you will not change and will not fall apart like everything else is around you. These people were losing their earthly goods, and he says, no, God has an inheritance, right? Incorruptible, undefiled, waiting for you, right? Reserved for you. So that's why he tells them these things. And that's why he's sharing this again. It's all part of the same letter, remember? We have things here that don't endure, but God has things for us that will endure. Okay, here we have a city, a place to live, but we're just strangers in a strange land here. It won't endure, but we are citizens of heaven, as Paul writes. And there are things that we can count on, such as God's promises. God, who has promised all these things, his love is committed love. So we can count on those things being there, right? So that's the message that Peter's trying to get across to them. So here's this command to love one another. Now, how seriously do we need to take this? Because we get, I come and share a few commands a week, right? Well, something like that. And here's something we need to do. Here's something we need to focus on. Here's something we need to, think about and incorporate into our lives, and that's how we're growing, right? But here's this one command in particular: love one another. I think if we get nothing else right as Christians, we want to get this one right. If we did nothing else but try to do that, we will be kept busy for the rest of our lives to love one another, because the challenge of that just in our human relationships, right? Even with people that we really want to be with, which isn't all Christians. Let's face facts. We're not all alike. We don't all get along. We wouldn't want to be married to one another and live in the same house as one another. But we do need to love one another all the same. We do need to still have this commitment. And like John said, this is what demonstrates to the world that we are separated, that we are holy, is that we love one another, right? Here's the deal. If we don't love one another, then I was thinking of a few different ways to view this, both sports analogies again, but we're like a baseball player. I'll switch sports. Like a baseball player who doesn't catch a ball, who won't catch the ball, right? What kind of a baseball player is that? Or the race car driver who doesn't actually ever get behind the wheel, but just deeply believes in racing. Racing is right, racing is good. but doesn't actually do it, then you go, well, he's not really a race car driver, is he? And the same for us. If the law and the prophets are summed up by love the Lord your God and love your neighbors yourself, but we're not doing that, then we're not really in it. Then we have something else, and that's unfortunately where some people will find themselves, that they've got something else. They thought it was Christianity that they were a part of, but really it was churchianity, or similar politics-ianity, which is a famous, real popular one right now. So let's all gather and share our political view about things and nod our heads and go, yeah, let's get them. Or social gathering-ianity, which is I need to get together with people, need to be social, we can do some things, go on picnics. What we need, okay, is whatever we do, it needs to be grounded in a commitment to love one another. So whatever group you find yourself with, whatever church, whatever fellowship, home group, Bible studies, there needs to be a commitment with those people. We're going to love each other to the end. That's what Peter's asking of us here. We don't have to all live together, and we don't, not like a marriage. We don't have. It's not that. It's just, but we need that same level of we're in this together. And so if we're not getting that, though, because of the number of times it's brought up, I'd say we're missing the point. Jesus says, this is my commandment. Of all the things he could have said, that was the one he says, this is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. And to be honest, okay, so now I'm talking to the online community, right? Those of you who are probably watching because you can't meet regularly in a church, or maybe you never have, and so hopefully you will sometime soon. I encourage you to do that as soon as you feel it's safe to do so and right to do so. But I know a lot of churches right now are meeting online. I'm not the only guy doing this, yeah. And this is where there's a big challenge that for the church to continue to love one another to the end. But then how do we actually do it when we don't even have a Sunday get together, right? How are we going to do that? And that's a challenge right now for churches. And I'd say here's a couple things you can be doing to show you're committed to loving for one another. That one of them is, the most obvious, is to pray for one another. I've said that before, that prayer is perhaps one of the most, or not the most, but maybe one of the best ways to display love for somebody. Because we can talk about, well, I love our church and I love you people, and the pastor can say, hey, I love you guys. But then to actually take time out of your schedule to stop and pray for them. Put everything else aside, because I've noticed in my own life, I can say I prayed for you, which meant that you came to mind while I was driving, and I said, oh Lord, help that person, and I prayed for them, and that's fine, and that counts. But I'm also talking about, will you set aside time? Like right now, I've got a couple times a week, I will go through our church directory. It's not a very large directory, but go through those people, and I will pray specific things for them a couple times a week. I make sure it happens. I set aside time. I lock the door. It's going to happen. That's my display of love for them. See, I love you enough to set aside some time and do this, and others of them I know are doing that for me more than a couple times a week. So that's one way that we can be doing that. One way you can be doing that. Get a listing of your church directory, and you probably don't even know all these people, right? But just pray for them. Pray for God to bless them. Or maybe pick out a group per week. Do the A's and B's this week and the C's and D's next week, or something like that. To be praying for people is huge. Another thing that's practical is people still have needs, and so finding ways to meet people's needs outside the church. I've talked about that. But now we're talking about inside the church, to love one another in that way. That will require finding out what needs are. And so that might be a call to the pastor, a call to the church, say, maybe the church can do something to set up a list, on their website, to say, here are some needs that we have, and people can sign up for stuff. It's very practical, leaving stuff on somebody's doorstep, a meal, a care package of some kind. Those things count. They say, I love you. A card. I got a couple cards this week from people at church. I got a card and a letter. Somebody sat and thought of 2 letters, actually. people sitting, taking time to share something with me. And they were positive things. They were great things. And so that's a sign of love. I really appreciated those things. You could do that for somebody else. It says, I'm committed to loving you, and I'm going to take some time out right now to do something for you. Same stuff we would be doing without COVID-19 spreading around, but I know, the restrictions, the lockdown, many people feel like, I just can't do anything. But I think we can. We just have to look for it. We can also look, I was going to give this example too, you can look outside the church, outside your church, to the larger church. There's actually a website called persecution.com. Makes it easy to find. Persecution.com. You can go there. It's, if you've heard of this group, the Voice of the Martyrs. And this is a group that's tracking, martyred Christian groups throughout the world. And, many countries are actually very hostile. And most of us in North America have no idea what that's about. But in other places, it's a very different existence, a very different Christian life that they're living. And many of them feel totally separate from the rest of us, and they are. And anyway, there are ways to show love to them also. So I just thought I'd throw that one out there in case you've never heard of it. Persecution.com. And that's a way to express love to other believers, to encourage people, even though you're on lockdown and you're restricted, perhaps to your house, but you can still send out a letter. You can still donate to people who are out and about doing things. Ways to show love. The other thing I was going to say, this love is without ceasing, is meant to endure, and I want to say that this is perhaps challenged most. It will be a challenge for people that we fellowship regularly with, right? People in our church, but it's also a challenge to love those people who used to fellowship with the church and now don't. People leave churches for all kinds of reasons. I'm not going to get into all the reasons, nor am I interested in judging the reasons that people are leaving. But some of those leavings are very painful, not in a healthy way. Some of them are very hurtful. People that we have loved and now they've gone and left a bad taste in our mouth when they left, okay? How do we continue to love them? Because there's no command that says, well, love them while they're there, and then if they move on, well, forget about those folks, right? We have to still love them. The Apostle Paul struggled with this in his last letter he wrote to Timothy. And he said, everyone's abandoned me. That's where he was sitting in prison. He's like, everyone's abandoned me. So-and-so went to this place, so-and-so went to that place. They're all gone. They've left me. He felt like we had something going, and then obviously, what am I worth to them now? They had to go to such and such. Felt abandoned. And we can feel that way sometimes when people leave a church, when people leave a fellowship or a home group or whatever it is. So how do we continue to love them? Because that's part of the calling. And that's where I thought I'd just bring out that challenge. Because in a sense, when people leave a church, it's a divorce. Which doesn't mean that people have to stay in the same church their whole lives. I don't mean that. Nobody expects that. Because like I said, there are very legitimate reasons for leaving a church. When, we came out here to the Crossing Church, we were part of Northwest Baptist, and we loved that church. We've been there about 5 years. It's where we got married. It's where we really come to faith. It's where, we were growing up in Christ, and we started to serve, and we loved the people, and they loved us. And oh man, we said we're going to leave, and there were a lot of tears. We shed a lot of tears. It was hard to leave that church. But it was a good reason to leave. We were being called to ministry. We were put on their missionary board, because off we go. So that was a healthy reason to leave. But most reasons are not so healthy, okay? And we've all experienced that. We may have done that, the point isn't to judge those things right now. Just to say it happens, and what do we do about it? I've been tempted to leave a church. Again, Northwest Baptist, I was tempted to leave. Great church. I love that place. I love those people. But I felt, at one point, I've shared this story before, that I've been overlooked in my role in developing the worship team and where we were at that time. There was just one statement made at a meeting, and And so I was going to show them. So I went, Saturday night to a different church, a bigger church. And maybe I'll get involved here, or they'll appreciate me, right? Ariana had just been born, and so I used that as an excuse, passive-aggressive excuse, to not participate on the worship team for a month or two. I just need some time off, with my newborn. And I did enjoy that, and that was true, to get to sit with her and go to the crying room and all that experience. But it was all, part of this thing. Like, I'm gonna show them. Really weak. I'm glad I didn't leave, but I was tempted to. So I've experienced that temptation too. I get it. I was planning to divorce the fellowship. So bless you if you haven't done that or been tempted to do that. Some of us have done that. Most of us, I'm sure, have experienced that. If you've been in a church, you've had people that you've come to love, come to trust, and then they get, they blow up. Something happens. There's a big thing, and then they're gone. And it can be very, very, very painful. But it happens so often. I don't know that when people arrive in a fellowship, that the plan is to say, I will endure with these people. So that would be the first challenge to say, is that our thinking? And if not, can we get to that point to say, I plan to endure with these people, and it will take the work of God to remove me, moving away. Obviously, there's another legitimate reason. But it hurts when people leave us, especially people that we've invested in and who we felt had invested in us, and there's a relationship there, right? And then it's, like I said, it's like a divorce. But we are called to still love them, and not just say, well, I'll love them in heaven, but to continue to love them now is really difficult. This is a fight we have to do, to fight to love, because I'll tell you from experience, the temptation is, it's a fight against our flesh, because our flesh says, no, they wronged you. No, they said some things about you or thought some things about you, whatever it is, that weren't true, that weren't right, and you need to, it won't be right until you're vindicated of that, till the record is set straight. They need to see that, and that's when you think of them, that's the thought. That's keeping a record of wrongs, right? That's not the love that Paul describes. Bitterness. I didn't even know what bitterness was till I'd experienced people leaving the church for what I felt were not healthy reasons, and I was very hurt by it. And what grew in me is, when I thought of those people, it was like, not love, not forgot all about the commitment to love. I'm not talking about their part, talking about my part in this. They're the ones who left, but I'm the one I'm concerned about losing the commitment to love. Because what takes over then is bitterness, or they come and they go, just kind of an attitude that says, well, they come in through the front door, they'll go out through the back. Those are not, I don't believe, healthy attitudes that are a commitment, are they? They come in through the front, they go out through the back. Isn't a commitment attitude at all. It maybe protects us from feeling hurt, but this commitment to love is, and so that would even, I say, fall under the category of loving our enemies, right? Because our enemies aren't just, the bad guys out there in the world. They're not always just the Nazis or whatever. We're even supposed to love the Nazis or love the whoever's, the terrorists or the enemies. Enemies, for most of us, for many of us, are going to be other Christians, other people who claim to be Christians, other people who that we've had fellowship with, other people we've shared communion with, people we've sung songs with, people we've done ministry with, and now it falls under that category of, in a sense, they're my enemy. They've wronged me, they've hurt me. They see me this way, I see them that way. It's no longer what it used to be, but we still have to love. There's no getting out of that one. This is the commitment, right? I don't think Peter's telling anybody, hey, love one another without ceasing, unless they say something that really bothers you, unless they leave the church because you wanted orange carpet instead of blue, or unless, this sort of a thing. There's no unless. We are called to love no matter what. So I thought I'd bring up this challenge because it's one that affects me. So it's a personal one for me, and it's a battle I have to do. And you probably do as well. and you will once you get back into regular services and regularly meeting with people. Because right now, if you're meeting online only and not doing Zoom stuff, but just not engaging with a lot of other people, well, boy, it's easy to love them, isn't it? Easy to love people you don't have to engage with, but when they're on the radar, it can be a lot more difficult. But it begins with this commitment, and that's where what I want to leave us with is we've got to have this commitment to love one another. If we don't have that agreement mentally to start with, if we don't have that commitment, I'm going to love the people here in this church. We don't have to start with, there's no way we're going to survive disagreements, which are going to come. They're going to come. Disappointments are going to come, even more than disagreements. Okay, disagreements are going to come most certainly at my level of involvement as a pastor and a preacher, right? I got people disagreeing with me left and right. So how are we going to survive that? Well, we've survived that so far by people's commitment to love. My commitment to them and their commitment to me, especially their commitment to me. I've seen that, experienced that, been blessed by that. Disappointments. We all get disappointed by each other. That's the not the hallmark, that's not a great word, but any relationship is full of disappointments. We disappoint each other all the time. But if this love is to last, we have to be committed to, I'm going to love you even when you disappoint me. And be ready ahead of time, because it's going to hit us. If we're not ready ahead of time, it's going to hit us. Oh, they've disappointed me. Maybe again, either I'm out of here, or they need to be out of here, or I need to get out of this, or and then we look for ways out rather than how do I love them despite that disappointment, despite that disagreement. It takes a commitment to do it. It's the same. That's one reason why I encourage people to get married and to go through the vows and all of that, because there we have this I'm going to say it out loud. I'm going to commit to this thing. It's not just something that I came up with. It's not just a fleeting idea we had. Let's get married, or let's be in a relationship, or whatever. It's like we want to say these things and mean them, and give a ring as a reminder. And we don't do that with churches. We don't do that with each other. Okay, I get that, and that would be a little weird if we were to start. But we need to have the same attitude of commitment. And so I've been really encouraged with that this week, and also very challenged to think about it. But this is the kind of thing I'm seeing at our church. It's a little group. We've lost a lot of people. That's why we're a little group. So I've got a lot of people I need to keep loving, even though it's not easy for me to keep doing that. But it's still the call. And so that's the challenge for me. But I see this level of commitment already in our group at the Crossing. We love each other. We take good care of each other, and we are committed. And I know there's a commitment because there's been difficulty, because there's been disagreements, there's been disappointments, there's been discouragements. But we hang in there with each other because we're committed. It's a beautiful thing to see. So my encouragement to our church, and it will be on Sunday when I say this out loud to them, is let's keep that up. And let's have that enduring love. It's based in the example and the power of Christ himself, right? This isn't something that we're just going to find within ourselves, or like I said, this isn't romantic love. This isn't feelings. This is something that overcomes all of those things. That's there regardless of the feelings, because it's Christ himself who gives us that example of doing so, and then also empowers us to do the same for each other. And it's what's going to separate us out, and that's one reason Peter is sharing this. One thing that's going to separate us out from the rest of groups that meet together, religious groups, social groups. It's what makes us different than the Elks, who are a group that meet together and do a lot of nice things for people. But we're going to love one another to the end. And that's the call I want to leave you with, and the challenge. So I pray that you have a blessed Valentine's Day. Enjoy the love of Christ this day, the most important love you'll ever know. Enjoy the love of Christ this day, and ask him for the power to share that with others all the way to the end, and to be able to have that commitment to do so. I look forward to seeing you again next week. If you can tune in. We'll be starting in on chapter 2. Sort of a similar thing that he's going, but he's starting to move into some real practical stuff, and so I'm looking forward to getting into that with you. So thanks for tuning in, and may you have a blessed week. Bye now.